You have been on a job site for a decade. You know how to stay safe. But when you take the OSHA exam and click what seems like the obvious real-world answer, you get it wrong. These 10 and 30-hour exams are mandatory checkpoints. They stand between you and high-paying safety roles, or advanced ASP and CSP certifications. Here is the problem. Years of field experience do not translate to passing this test. That is because the exam does not test common sense. The OSHA Act is a rigid legal framework. To pass, you have to stop thinking like a tradesman and start thinking like a regulatory auditor. This legal structure carries the full weight of the federal government, signed into law back in 1970. Operating under the Department of Labor, OSHA's explicit mandate is to enforce federal safety standards and issue fines to projects that violate them. We're going to analyze the tricky vocabulary the exam uses to trap you, navigate the split between 1910 and 1926 standards, deconstruct the Focus Four hazards, and lay out an exact study method to guarantee you pass. If you want to earn that card, you have to abandon your job site shortcuts and strictly adopt the exact legal terminology used by the government. The first trap you will encounter on the exam is buried in the legal vocabulary of the questions themselves. Words like shall and must denote non-negotiable legal requirements. Should, on the other hand, indicates a best practice recommendation. If a question asks what an employer must do, and you select an answer describing what they should do, you will fail that question. This exactness extends to job titles. The most frequently tested regulatory title on the exam is the competent person. OSHA defines a competent person very specifically. It is someone with the authority to identify predictable hazards on a site, and who has the authorization to take prompt corrective measures to eliminate them. The exam will frequently try to confuse this with a secondary regulatory title, the qualified person. A qualified person holds a recognized degree, certificate, or professional standing, and has successfully demonstrated the ability to solve complex problems. To put that in concrete terms, a competent person inspects a scaffold to make sure it is safe to use today. A qualified person designs a complex fall arrest system from scratch. OSHA uses these titles to enforce the General Duty Clause. If an inspection finds a scaffold was erected without a competent person's supervision, the agency has the legal basis to issue a direct citation. The safety protocols you use on a job site remain consistent, but the numerical height that triggers a mandatory citation is determined by the specific industry code. The exam covers two primary rule books, 29 CFR 1910 for general industry and 29 CFR 1926 for construction. The core rule here is that the specific activity being performed dictates the standard, not the geographical location of the worker. If a crew does construction inside a manufacturing plant, they follow 1926 standards. The most tested metric is the fall protection threshold. General Industry 1910 mandates fall protection at 4 feet. Construction 1926 requires it at 6 feet. The exam will not stop there. It will test your knowledge of specific operational exceptions within the construction industry. There are 3 exceptions you need to memorize. Scaffolding requires protection at 10 feet. Steel erection requires it at 15. Fixed ladders trigger requirements at 24. Knowing exactly which regulatory book you are operating under is the only way to accurately identify the legal height threshold on your test. Once you hit those thresholds, the test shifts from asking when protection is required to exactly how it must be engineered to satisfy the code. The regulations divide this into 2 categories. Fall prevention uses passive systems like guardrails to stop falls before they happen. Fall arrest uses active systems to catch workers after a fall starts. This photograph shows a personal fall arrest system. It features standard components, anchorage, body wear, connectors, and a deceleration device. The system limits free fall to 6 feet, caps arresting force at 1,800 pounds, and strictly limits the maximum combined load to 310 pounds. A common exam trap tests equipment limitations. Body belts are strictly prohibited for fall arrest. A full body harness is mandatory. Beyond the physics of the equipment, the test will evaluate your knowledge of financial compliance regarding personal protective equipment. OSHA legally requires employers to provide and pay for almost all necessary PPE. The government ensures that cost is never a barrier to a worker's safety. These tolerances represent the intersection of human physics and employer liability. On the exam, missing a single pound or foot means missing the point of the standard. Electrical safety is another major pillar of the Focus Four hazards and a frequent failure point for test takers. The most common conceptual trap in this section involves confusing the definitions of grounding and bonding. Grounding is the process of creating a safe, direct path for electrical current to flow into the earth to prevent human shock. Bonding is connecting metallic parts together to prevent dangerous voltage differences between them. This diagram illustrates a ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, the primary engineered control for temporary power. You'll be tested on its precise mechanical threshold. A GFCI trips the circuit in 1/40th of a second if it detects a leak of 4 to 6 milliamps. You must also know spatial clearance rules. Equipment and ladders must remain at least 10 feet away from energized power lines up to 50 kilovolts. Surviving electrical hazard questions requires memorizing exact mathematical tolerances, like specific milliamps and milliseconds, rather than relying on general caution. Now that we have covered the technical specifications, let us look at the practical strategy for passing the 10 and 30-hour courses. This is the HSE Study method. You must use practice quizzes to proactively train your brain to spot regulatory traps instead of leaning on your memory of job site norms. You also have to pace yourself. OSHA enforces a strict training mandate that limits your daily coursework to exactly 7.5 hours. Passing the 10 and 30 exams is the baseline requirement that proves you can accurately parse the legal code. Master the code, engineer the safety, and subscribe to HSE Study to build the foundation for a professional safety career.